Hi guys, and welcome to Sister's Kitchen. Today we're going to be making some gyoza style pork dumplings. So if you're ready, let's get started. You will need ground pork, Chinese cabbage, shiitake mushrooms, cornstarch, gyoza leaves, chili of your choice, garlic, ginger, spring onion, Mirin, rice vinegar, sesame oil, soy sauce, a bunch of bowls to mix your ingredients, baking paper, and some containers to keep your gyoza in, a spatula and tongs, a pan with a lid, a timer, something to measure your water in, some sesame oil, and some peanut oil. First we're going to do our cabbage, so we're just going to take some leaves off and cut the middle bit out because that's really hard and bitter. And what I like to do is I like to stack my leaves so that they're easier to chop up later. How fine you cut it is up to you. I like to have it really fine though so that it mixes really well with the meat. Now, I see a lot of recipes where people do sort of half cabbage, half meat. I hate that, but you can add however much or however little you want. So when it comes to measurements, just do your own thing and don't worry about it. Then we're going to work with our shiitake, and we can just pop the middle bit out like this. Then slice it, and the reason we add shiitake to our meat is that it sort of has a bit of a spongy texture and it really just sort of builds into that flavor and the texture of it all. I like to cut it into really tiny bits as well, but you can do it however you like. Now some spring onion. I like to peel the outside off and then chop it, and we add the spring onion because that gives it a little bit of an oniony taste and it also just balances the flavors really well. Now for some garlic, I always pop the middle bit out because I think that that's a little bit bitter, and what I like to do is just cut it really, really finely so that you don't end up biting into chunks of garlic when you make your dumplings. When it comes to chili, you don't have to add any, but I find that I really like the spicy flavor to it, and so I cut it really, really small so that it blends really well and you don't end up with sort of one gyoza that's really spicy and then one that isn't. So just be really careful with this. Time for some ginger. Now you just want to cut the outside off of it first. And what I like to do is slice it into little bits like this. And then I stack them and slice it into strips, and then I can sort of chop that. And I find that that's just a lot easier, especially if you don't have a lot of sharp knives. Now we're going to make our filling, and I'm just going to put my ground pork into a large bowl. And I use pure pork, and the important part here is you're going to add however much cabbage and however much shiitake and everything else you want, but you don't want to squeeze it. You just want to roll it around and it will gently break on its own accord. The more you squeeze and work at it, the tougher your meat is going to be in your dumplings. Now, I like to smell it intermittently to make sure that I can smell some garlic and I can smell a bit of the ginger, but it's not overpowering, so you're going to kind of have to figure out what works for you. So here you can see sort of roughly how much of everything is in it. So once that's done, we're going to add our seasoning. So I do about 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, and just to make sure that it's a little brown. Then a bit of sesame oil to give it a little bit of that fattiness. A tablespoon or 2 of mirin to give it a little sweet flavor. And a tiny bit of rice vinegar just to balance out the flavors. And now we're going to add a bunch of cornstarch, and the reason you do this is to make sure that when you leave it overnight, you don't end up with a bunch of water in the bottom of your bowl. It's just going to keep everything together. So then we're just going to wrap it up and put it in our fridge overnight so that all the flavors can meld together. So if we want to fold our gyoza, we have to make sure that we thaw our leaves. And we're just going to check on our pork and make sure that the color is sort of consistent and that everything is sort of well mixed together. So here's the fun part. You take one of the gyoza leaves and you put it in your palm. Then you want to gently roll your fingers through the pork. It's important not to squeeze it because otherwise you're going to end up with meat hockey pucks. So you just put a little in the center and you wet half your gyoza leaf like this. Then you pinch at the top, careful not to touch the meat, and you fold in towards the middle on one side, which you can see me doing here. Now as you can see, the meat is staying in the middle, so you don't have to touch it, and all you have to do is close it on the other side. Now the way that we close the gyoza leaf is what keeps the meat in the middle so that you don't have to shape it or force it. So basically you're just going to end up rolling your finger along the meat, and it will break off by itself in whatever way that it wants to, and that will make sure that when you actually cook it, you won't have chunks. Now this might take a while. It took me a couple hours to do this because I had about 1.5 kilos of pork. So find a place where you're comfortable, put a movie on, and yeah, good luck! So I just want to show you how I put my gyoza away because I make a lot and I like to freeze it. So I tend to use baking paper and Tupperware containers, and I just cut flat bits for different layers and strips to put in between each gyoza because if you freeze them together then they will stick and they will break. Alright, so now we're going to cook. We're going to put some peanut oil in a pan and we're going to put that on a high flame. Once the oil is hot, we're just going to stick them in our pan. And then we're going to let it cook for 3 minutes. Once we're done with that, we're going to put about 1 cup of water in our pan, put the lid on, and we're just going to let that slowly boil down for 10 minutes. Now that that's done, we're going to take the lid off again, add some sesame oil, and then continue to fry for 3 more minutes. And now that that's done, we can take them out and they're ready to serve. So here are our gyoza. They're soft in the center, but they've got a sort of crunchy bottom. They're just my favorite things to eat when I'm feeling lazy. Thanks for joining me on Sister's Kitchen, and I hope to see you guys back soon.